Welcome back to Rising. And the 2018 midterms saw a massive blue wave of progressive candidates elected to office.
So is the new mainstream on the left progressive ideas? According to the co-founder of the Progressive Change campaign, the midterms proved that, quote, the center of gravity within the Democratic Party and the general electorate has dramatically shifted in the direction of bold economic populism. To expand on this, we're joined by Adam Green, co-founder of the Progressive Change Committee. Adam, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. Now, I would wonder, so how do you assess this basic paradigm, which would be most people would look at election results. Democrats did well, very well in the House, obviously, not well particularly in the Senate, but very well in the House. But Ocasio-Cortez, okay, she won in Queens. I'm from New York City. Queens is pretty blue. Okay. I mean, you look at places where progressives did very well, they tend to be more blue. Where are you seeing the shift of the center or the center of the Democratic Party or the center of the country to the left? Where's that happening?
Yeah. Well, the Progressive Change Institute did a month-long study right before Election Day and looked at every potential candidate who could win for the House and looked at their website, their Twitter, their Facebook, their TV ads, their debate performances. And basically made a huge spreadsheet. What do they actually campaign on? And then released the result in terms of all the winners coming into the House freshman class after the election. What did it find? 65% of incoming House freshmen campaigned on some version of Medicare for All or expanding Social Security benefits. Nearly 80% campaigned against Big Pharma, wanting to take down the prices of prescription drugs. About 82% campaigned on some version of campaign finance reform, getting corporate money out of politics. So if some people want to call that moderate, that's great for us.
Yeah,
but basically the center of gravity has changed.
Is that necessarily progressive, though, versus anti-corruption, which I think is generally accepted across the country?
Yeah, well, again, campaign finance reform, basically what we're looking at is, several years ago, we had a Democratic president, unfortunately, saying that he was going to cut Social Security as a deal with the Republicans, a grand bargain. In order to raise taxes on the wealthy, we'd cut Social Security. Both of the Republican ideas there were unpopular, but for some reason, Democrats were going to cut that deal. Fortunately, that didn't happen. The fact that we now have Democrats across the country campaigning on expanding Social Security just shows how the center of gravity has shifted. We have so many people taking an anti-corporate stance when one critique of the Democratic Party has been too much corporate money. Yeah. So the fact that there's a push for campaign finance reform is consistent with this whole set of issues where generally we're challenging corporate power and going to bat for everyday working people.
You mentioned specifically Medicare for All, and there clearly has been a shift, at least within the Democratic Party, for a Medicare for All platform. I remember during the debates about Obamacare, there were conservatives like me who were saying this is all an effort to get us closer to single payer, and everybody said, oh, no, that's never going to happen. And now here we are talking about Medicare for All, which is effectively a version of single payer.
So you're saying you were right? Is that what you're saying?
You're saying that I predicted the future. That part of it.
Humble brag? I don't know what that is.
That part of it is true. But nonetheless, I mean, Medicare for All is there's going to be a huge field. We were just talking about this before the show. Huge field of Democratic candidates. Everybody expects that going to 2020. Is a Democrat, whoever it is, are you confident that candidate, male or female, going to run on Medicare for All? Is that really going to be the Democratic Party platform for the presidency in 2020?
Well, first of all, the idea that's tremendously popular is that families should not be at the mercy of for-profit insurance companies that profit by denying people care, right? So the question is, what do you do about that? I think the new floor for a debate within the Democratic Party is a Medicare option for all. Anybody who wants to should have the ability to buy into Medicare if they want to, including small businesses. Or they can have private insurance. Some people see that as a glide path to eventually having Medicare for all single payer. We'll see. But even those who are the most strident advocates for single payer say that no matter what, the first step is likely some version of a public option. Okay. In my view, what could be better if you believe in Medicare for all single payer than allowing millions of people to voluntarily opt to have Medicare? Love it, tell their friends about it, and have millions more opt in. That's how we win hearts and minds over the long term. And that is one version of Medicare for All in the short term. And
thinking through the broad spectrum of progressive ideas that are out there within the Democratic Party, you've got a new class coming into the Congress that, again, fully embodies that broad spectrum. You got Connor Lambs and Abigail Spanbergers next to your Ocasio-Cortezes and Ayanna Presleys. What type of internal dynamics do you see happening as they start to undertake any type of legislation in the House?
I'm really glad you mentioned Connor Lamb because, right after he got elected, we got so many questions from reporters. What does it mean that it took a moderate to win in a 20-point Trump district? And first, our point was most swing districts aren't 20-point Trump districts. But nonetheless, if you look at his TV ads, what did he campaign on? He promised not to cut Social Security and Medicare. He said, I don't take corporate PAC money. He said, I'm going to fight for jobs and workers. Again, if that's moderate in today's 2018 world, God bless.
But it's not getting all Democrats across the finish line.
Wait, and one last point. He is now the new co-chair with Elizabeth Warren of the Expand Social Security Caucus, just showing again how the center of gravity has changed. I
think the follow-up to that is I don't think that type of moderate definition is going to be enough to get Democrats across the finish line in terms of national or even statewide races. We saw with Andrew Gillum in Florida. He was a very progressive candidate, didn't get him across the finish line. Beto O'Rourke, Texas, didn't get him across the finish line.
Georgia. I could do this all day.
So, thank you so much, Buck.
That's what I'm here for.
But thinking through what will it take to have national appeal with a candidate from the Democratic Party to be able to be successful in the 2020 election, what are you thinking?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, let's just start with Andrew Gillum, Stacey Abrams, and Beto O'Rourke. I don't think it's a disputable fact that they did better than any Democrat in recent years statewide.
Of course.
So, again, it shows how
in tough states.
In tough states. You know, I spent one of the best years of my life in South Dakota, right after 9/11, working in a state that President Bush had won by 20 points 2 years before. This is the year that Democrats lost the Senate majority. We won that year by 524 votes because culturally conservative farmers and ranchers, pro-gun, pro-life, culturally conservative Republicans were willing to vote for a Democrat when economic populism was front and center. That year it was Social Security and protecting little guy family farmers from being taken over by big ag. So our point would be, especially in red and purple states, lean into economic populism. Because you know what? Republican grandparents, possibly your grandparents, love their Social Security and Medicare as much as Democratic grandparents do.
Do you think the Democratic Party is at a point now where they're willing to embrace the term democratic socialism as a central idea to the Democratic Party in America?
No.
Really? I mean, because you have Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. I mean, they talk about it. So I'm just wondering why that is. Because this is now spoken about openly by people like Ocasio-Cortez, who will say, yes, I'm a democratic socialist. I mean,
some people can opt for whatever labels they want.
But so why not? I mean, and how they differentiate themselves from democratic socialism in Europe if all these ideas are so good and everything's going to get paid for and it's going to be great? Why walk away from that? Why not just embrace it?
I mean, why not cut to the chase and talk about the real issues is a real question. You know, the same poll that shows that only 20% of Americans call themselves liberal will show 70% support for expanding Social Security benefits. Why have a proxy for what people believe as opposed to saying, hey, what do you believe? You know, on issue after issue, on big economic issues of the day, our side wins. Again, debt-free college, 71% to 19% popular. Expand Social Security, 70% to 15% popular. A Medicare option for all has a net 58-point advantage. It's huge. These are not 50-50 issues, so why bury ourselves?
But again, the Medicare for all, we actually did a poll here at the Hill on this. It's very popular. And when people find out actually what their taxes would have to be in order to sustain this, then it becomes a lot less popular. So to embrace a lot of these programs, is there a willingness to say, it's not just the rich who can bear this burden. It just financially doesn't work. You'd have to have higher taxes across the board. Is that something that you're willing to do to make a case for that?
Well, two things. First, there's multiple versions of Medicare for all. You know, I believe that Medicare option for all, allowing any small business or family who wants to have Medicare to buy into it, is one version of allowing anyone to get Medicare. But point number two, you know, I don't think Bernie Sanders did a great job explaining the finances of this in the presidential debates of 2016. But my analogy would be, let's say you're paying $15 to park your car in a garage. And someone says, you know what, we are going to charge you $5 in taxes to have free street parking. Now there's $10 more in your pocket, although technically on paper your taxes went up $5. You're saving money. That's basically how Medicare for all single payer would work. It's a vast cost savings for the American people, even though you can play games on paper.
So the government would turn into a massive efficiency and cost-saving machine for the first time in history.
If you want to simplify it that way.
I mean, well, that's what we're talking about. The government would be better at the delivery of health care and paying for health care than the private sector.
Would you rather pay for your own roads as opposed to having public roads? Do you want to build your own school as opposed to having public schools? I mean, there's a lot of public, your own water systems. I mean, there's a lot of public infrastructure in this country. We're the only civilized country without, a massive, healthcare protection for the people. Like most other countries don't have this vast uninsured population. But again, I'm curious, are you granting that in general, this would be a cost savings for
No, I think that the government is terrible at saving anybody money. I mean, I used to work for the federal government. All the government does is spend money and raise taxes. Well, that tends to be what the history of the last couple hundred years tells us. So they're not good at this.
Again, we don't need proxies. Look at the facts. Medicare has a lower administrative cost than private insurance. Why? Because private insurance spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year on marketing. They pay their CEOs through the roof. They do duplicative services as opposed to having Medicare, which is super popular with Republicans.
We also have a $22 trillion debt, and the average recipient of Medicare over the life of the Medicare program, once they're enrolled, takes out twice what they paid in over the lifetime of their taxes for Medicare. So that's just, I mean, that's a great gig if you can get it, but eventually the music stops, you don't have enough money.
Sounds like
I know, I sound like Ebenezer Scrooge over here. I want everybody to have health care too.
Merry Christmas to you.
But I like the Warren wing, by the way. I like the Warren
The Elizabeth
wing.
Warren wing of American politics is on the rise.
All right, we're going to leave it there, folks. And thank you so much for
Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about the issues. Thank you. Next on Rising, the White House issues a ceasefire in the press pass feud with Jim Acosta. And will Nancy Pelosi be elected speaker?
And of course, the story lighting up Twitter, Ivanka Trump using a personal email, her emails, to send hundreds of government emails. Team Rising breaks it all down when Rising continues.